The Royal Marine Commandos are changing. So I flew out to Gibraltar to find out how and why. Commandos, small, highly mobile, raiding and reconnaissance forces. In the Second World War, commandos spawned famous units like the Special Air Service, the Special Boat Service, and the Parachute Regiment. But it's the Royal Marines who never dropped the commando name. Even when their roles slowly began to change, and they became less specialised. When Marines started to operate like traditional infantry, and were deployed as battalions to places like Helmand Province. Now though, the Future Commando Force program is changing that. It's the biggest change to the Marines since those days in the Second World War. These Marines are of 4-3 Commando, notable because their primary role is to protect the UK's nuclear deterrent. It means they're trained to operate in confined areas and to operate alone. They're equipped with technology and weapons unique in the UK Armed Forces, meaning they can provide a glimpse at what the Future Commando Force might look like in a couple of years. This week, the objective is deep inside the old Second World War tunnels, dug into Gibraltar's rock.
However, if it's overwhelming,
The orders set out a series of raids on enemy positions. So we just listened to the first set of orders that 4-3 Commando have had this week, and tonight it's all about subterranean warfare in tunnels. I think it's going to be a long night. Under the cover of darkness, the commandos insert from boats. It's pitch black, and that means we're using night vision cameras to capture the action. The commandos have just landed in this bay, and they're going to make their way up the cliff for an attack on the enemy position. From there, they're patrolling through the streets. Nothing has been closed, so there's civilians along the way. It's surreal to be on normal streets during an exercise like this.
In terms of realism, it's always something that's hard to kind of demonstrate to the guys, is when civilians are walking around, when people are coming up to them and asking questions and things like that, when vehicles are driving by. You don't get that on Salisbury Plain, you don't get it in Wakefield police facilities or anything like that. So yeah, Gibraltar's good for that in terms of walking through the streets and, you know, armed, and background noise of dogs barking, people looking out our windows and stuff. It just adds to the realism.
The faint noise of TVs spills out onto the alleyways. The people inside have no idea there's commandos just outside their front door. Behind me is the entrance to someone's flat. That's someone's home. Normal infantry wouldn't deploy like this, but this is a glimpse at the Future Commando Force. Small, versatile teams, tailored for each mission. For 4-3 Commando, that's working in confined spaces with no support, where the stakes couldn't be higher.
Essentially, we're responsible for the protection of nuclear submarines and nuclear missiles and providing that assurance to allow them to go out and do their tasks on a routine basis. We've got a set mission, so we really focus in on the sort of CQB skills to make sure that we're at the required standard should the operation go live and we're required, that we're fully adept at operating in that complex environment in terms of office spaces, industrial spaces.
It's that non-stop mission to protect the nuclear deterrent that means these commandos are unlikely to form the initial company in the change programme. But their experiences, tactics and kit might help inform how the future commandos operate. The commandos make their way into the old World War II tunnels. So the Marines have made it up the hill, all the way to the tunnel entrance, where they've gained entry, and they're going to destroy the enemy. Contact.
Load it, lads! Put it! Lights on! Lights on! Rattle breaks the fire needed!
Pass that door, put yourself in that cover! Move up there! On me, on me!
Hold it here, fine.
It's not long before the tunnel is too dark even for our night vision.
The main sort of difficulty is sort of the narrow and confined spaces of it, but also just the total lack of any sort of form of ambient light. The guys have to be fairly slow and methodical to get through it, nice and quiet, nice and slow, nice and steady. There's difficulties with sort of the communications of it as well.
What's his battle number? Battle number!
Obviously there's no ability to kind of provide any sort of satellite imagery or anything like that, so for the commanders they are quite literally going into it in the dark a little bit.
They're on that tunnel. Yeah. Roger.
And then, with the objective secured, it's time to extract. A select group of commandos from across the Marines and the Army will form the first Future Commandos. They'll be known as Vanguard Strike Company, and they'll be the first to have access to new technology and weaponry as they head out on their first deployment this year. New technology like the throwbot, or thermal camera drones. 4-3 Commando are already using the C8 rifle, but that's because of their role protecting the nuclear deterrent.
It's a good weapon system, it's nice and light, it's compact, it's reliable. The short barrel sort of lends itself really well to not only what we do in 4-3, in those kind of narrow, kind of confined spaces, which obviously plays well in sort of subterranean environment that we've got going on here. It can be fired in both shoulders as well, so the lads can remain in cover. So overall, a good weapon system for here and back at the FAS lane.
But Future Commandos, they'll be using this same weapon system. The purpose of all of this is to offer the UK Armed Forces and NATO a unique capability, self-sufficient, mobile teams with modern equipment, not constrained by the logistical requirements of normal infantry.
It's sort of going back to our roots, equipped with the technology of kind of today and tomorrow. So going back to what we did historically in sort of the Second World War, small groups of sort of determined men working at sort of decent reach, going in, sort of sneaking in behind, and then getting out. The lads have to be a little bit more sort of self-sustaining and self-sufficient. They need to be able to look after themselves without that kind of bubble around them of support. They need to be thinking on their feet, they need to be fast, and they need to have that initiative and that cunning and dare to seize opportunities when they present itself.
Instead of deploying as a battalion, with all the support that requires, commandos will deploy in teams less than 100 strong. They'll be ready for deployment at a moment's notice, whether for warfighting, commando raids, or providing humanitarian assistance. For 4-3 Commando, the next objective is a village surrounded by cliffs. It's another raid.
Obviously, commando training is one of the longest and arguably most arduous infantry training regimes in the world, and we all come out of there with the basic commando skills. Some of the basic elements of being a commando haven't changed since the inception of the commandos. So scaling cliffs, getting to those inaccessible areas that the adversary doesn't think that you're able to reach. Coming from the sea, working at night, conducting raids, moving in and out quickly, taking the enemy completely by surprise, has always been some of the key tenets of the commando force. We're looking to build on those roots. Future Commando Force looks to integrate newer technologies, and so you'll see out here we've used things like the sort of RPAS, the throwbot, some of the shields, some of the specific situational awareness and communication systems that sort of augment our basic skills as a commando and allow us to access areas that aren't traditionally available to other sort of infantry regiments. So Future Commando Force is about honing our skills as a commando and integrating the new technology and the new ways of working to allow us to be more widely utilised across defence.
In the middle of World War II, when these tunnels were in use, the Royal Marines were reorganised as commandos. Now, the commandos are back, returning to their roots. Small teams, operating at reach in all theatres, carrying out strategic raids and then disappearing back into the night. Thanks for watching this episode of Access. Be sure to subscribe to see where we go next, and we've got plenty more from this Gibraltar trip coming up. So I've just followed the Marines up through this town. I don't know why there's chickens in the middle of Gibraltar. Brilliant.